This particular topic, as you see, will be just because yesterday we have discussed about the quantum materialistics, which are generally such algorithms, and oftentimes they are not suitable for real-time applications. But here we'll be dealing with some quantum neural networks. That means how to build up a quantum neural network model, which can be used further to enhance an image, to remove noises from image, noises and blurs from images. So we'll be starting with the classical methods, some preliminary ideas, some literature review about the different techniques which are already in existence regarding the these image enhancement procedures, and then switching on to the intelligent methods. Intelligent methods, that means the conventional soft computing techniques which are in existence. Then some hybrid methods which will be which will lead to the field of quantum mechanics, quantum computing. Now, I suppose these parts are already there in your, you already have learned. But anyway, I'll be just going through a very fast on this particular topic, because I would like to just give you a small, short story I generally give in every lecture on quantum computing, to just help people understand quantum entanglement, because quantum entanglement concept is a very abstract concept. So you can just appreciate it much better if you just go through this story, and then obviously you'll be just visualizing how a quantum neural network or a quantum neuron can be built up, and then using that how to go for a quantum backpropagation neural network architecture similar to the multi-layer perceptron architecture. And then some results will be shown, and with a conclusion. So this is, MS restoration is a very, very little knowledge is required, because all of you perhaps know about the, whenever you just acquire some image from the using any device as a camera, or you can go for transmission of the image. So obviously some ambient noise, some blur, etc. come in because of the environmental changes. So generally speaking, so different types of filter. Initially, people used to use these filtering techniques. They used to design some filters and based on the filters, they tried to filter the images. Even if you just if you just open Adobe Photoshop, you will see when once Adobe Photoshop opens up, you will see the opening screen where there will be a list of different scientists who have worked on the Adobe Photoshop software, and you will see some Indians also there who have contributed. So Adobe Photoshop houses a a huge number of filters, but then those filters, actually problem with these filters is that they have some, that means you have to build the filters based on some knowledge about the noise, nature and the degree of noise, type of noise, what type of noise is this, and also that how much amount of noise is there. So that is quite difficult in real-time situations. It is quite difficult to know what type of noise is there and how much amount of noise is there. So these filtering techniques generally are limited for those situations where you do not know the nature and the degree of noise. Okay, so in that case, because in the filtering techniques, you have to design the kernels, and the kernel design or the transfer function design are very hard, and also not suitable for embedding on hardware. So all these things generally make these things very difficult to perceive in reality. And then with the advent of this, just to avoid these limitations and come up with some several other techniques which can just run in real time and also can assess the situation or uncertainty and all these things, you have the neurofuzzy subcomputing paradigm which have come up, and several works have been done, including one work which has been done by myself and other things where the neural network comes handy in image filtering and also to restore images. So you see, these all most of the neural network techniques from the initial times were supervised in nature, but then that means you have to just feed the train the neural networks with noisy images, noisy as well as non-noisy images, and then a lot of images. And the more you train, the more better is the training accuracy as well as the better is the testing accuracy. That is a problem, although, but then training is that. But then training makes a man perfect. So in any case, a technology also becomes perfect with training. There is no harm in that. But oftentimes it poses a problem, because in real time situation it is not possible to use those cases. But then nowadays deep learning, you see, deep learning also is a supervised form of neural network, or you have to train it, and a huge data set is required. The training is a very computational intensive. That is why you require a huge amount of computing resources, and all these things are poses very hindrance to all these things. But then once it is trained, then it can work wonders. Like you see, deep learning has almost rather invaded every field of engineering, science, and everywhere. It is finding very good use. Although there is no mathematical foundation, strong mathematical foundation. As the founder hint on, he pointed out that deep learning may crumble at any point of time because there is no strong and solid mathematical foundation behind that. But even then, this is working fine. So what actually happens, neural network learn the noisy patterns, noisy trains, and then tries to figure out or tries to predict an image, a non-noisy image whenever it is tested with an unknown image. Now the interesting thing is that in the case of filters, you have to know the nature and degree of noise in advance, and then you can filter. And any unknown image where the amount and the degree of noise is not known, in those cases the filter is going to, maybe most of the times filters are generally falter. But here, once you train a neural network with lot of noisy and non-noisy samples, it is likely to come out in good state. Now, if you just go to all these things, quantum computing, how it evolved from the studies of Feynman and Bush, and then Peter showed them with the quantum algorithm for factorizing large integers. And generally, this concept or this computing paradigm is generally based on the principles of quantum mechanics, using the different features like superposition, decoherence, entanglement, coherence, and all these things. So, and superposition, the property where the linear combination of two or more solutions can also become a solution. It's also a possible solution to a problem. So that is why that opens up, because yesterday also we discussed about the superposition where the alpha and beta, the two probability amplitudes, were used to encode the chromosome. So similarly, this superposition principle also can be used whenever you use a qubit. That means qubit is in a superposed state of zero, of the basis states of 0 and 1, Ket 0 and Ket 1. And then entanglement is a property which actually gives rise to non-local interaction. Non-local interaction means it is not local. So just think of a situation that you have created a qubit or another entangled pair. So for example, one basis state you have created, and you have created another basis state, and you have just entangled them together, making an entangled pair. And then you take, for example, you are in India at your lab, and you just take another part of the qubit, another part of the entangled pair to another country, say for example Australia. Now those are very far apart, but although they are entangled, but they are far apart physically. Now the beauty of this thing is that whenever you try to measure the qubit at your end, whenever you are trying to measure the qubit at your end, because unless and until you measure the qubit, you will not get the classical outcome or other what is there inside. So once you measure the qubit at your end, what actually happens, the qubit in Australia automatically gets measured, automatically changes its state. So that is that means there may be some sort of communication between them. But actually, though no physical communication is there, but the interesting thing is that how it actually happens with the measurement at one end without any form of formal communication between two ends, how this affects the status of another one, which is residing very remote. So that is it's quite difficult to appreciate, because it seems like an abstract concept, but then it has evolved so much. Those people now are using them in widespread, and then in quantum internet and all that. Even neural networks also using neural networks and all these things also use quantum entanglement to their advantage. So I'll be just putting up a very short story just to help you understand this thing. So you see it an example of entanglement, because it is not a part of this particular lecture, but then particular topic rather, but then just to make you appreciate the thing in a better way. So you see, let us present a short story of Alice and Bob. So Alice and Bob, these two names very famous as far as cryptography and network security is concerned. So once upon a time, let us suppose Alice and Bob lived in Australia, okay? But they were living in Australia. Even though they were living in Australia, they were living up, or rather they were born in different towns, hometowns. One say born in Sydney, another in Canberra, say for example. So they did not have any communication or connection between them. They did not know each other, okay? So maybe in different cities of Australia, they were born and they were brought up. And suddenly it happened that Bob met Alice, maybe during their studies or the different interaction at different common places. They came to meet or came to know each other. Bob met Alice and they fell in love with each other. Fine. After some time, they got married to each other, and they were living happily when Alice got pregnant. Unfortunately, after a few months, Bob had to shift to the United States for his job. Now you see the situation. They were not known to each other. They came to know each other. They fell in love. They married. Alice got pregnant, different events are occurring. Alice got pregnant, and after some time, Alice got pregnant. Bob shifted to another country, say United States, for his job. So now, what is now at situation? Alice is lying back, or rather staying back in Australia, pregnant nature mode rather, and Bob has flown to United States. So they are disconnected from each other now. Just think of that this particular story or this particular event or incident happened in those times where there was no internet, no form of communication. There was even, just think of the ancient times when there was no formal communication between Alice and Bob. So once Bob has flown out of Australia and moved to United States, neither Alice nor Bob are able to communicate with each other. No mobile phone, nothing. No Linden letter, no postcard, nothing. No form of communication was there. That's the thing. They got isolated, separated from each other. So days passed by. After a gap of several months, Alice gave birth to a child. Another event is occurring. Alice gave birth to a child. Now you see, the moment Alice gave birth to the child, Alice becomes a mother. Very good. But before that moment, Alice was not a mother. Alice was a pregnant woman. Once she gave birth to the child, she became a mother. But strangely enough, Bob also becomes a father at the same time without even knowing that Alice has delivered. Now you see, the interesting thing is that there was no form of communication between Alice and Bob. So they didn't have any communication channel. So, but the situation, but if you see, just logically, you just think, once Alice become mother, that means once Alice delivered the child, her state changes to a mother. And simultaneously, even though Bob doesn't know that Alice has delivered, Alice has become a mother, he has become a father. Because from social status, he is now father. He cannot claim that I am not a father. He is a father because if he tells anyone that I am not a father, I am still, rather, I am not a father. In fact, my wife has not delivered, because he doesn't know, that will be lie. But you see, just social status is changing, because the people living back in Australia along with Alice, they know that Bob has become a father. Bob doesn't know, but the social status is automatically changed. So you see, without any form of communication, Bob has become a father. The state of Bob changes as soon as the state of Alice changes from a pregnant woman to a mother. So no matter there is no formal communication between them, the state changes. So this is in analogy with the quantum entanglement. So Alice and Bob got entangled when they got married. So they became an entangled pair. And property of entanglement states that when the state of one of the entangled states changes, the state of the other state automatically changes. So when the state of Alice changes to a mother, the state of Bob automatically changes to that of a father. Even it may happen that Bob doesn't know it. So you see, this may help you in some way to just think what actually happened. But then, although the physics or the mathematics is not there over here, but what actually, logically, what is actually happening over here? But then the situation is quite interesting. So this form of communication, that means even though there is no formal communication, obviously some information has been percolated from Alice end to Bob's end in some way or other, which is very, very fast, and also which is similar to that of telepathy, something like that. You can think of that. In telepathy, always you think that you can just connect to a person residing very, very abroad or very remote from you. But some sort of telepathic things are going on, but then you do not know. The speed of communication is very, very fast. The moment it gives birth to a child, even if you are using any formal communication channel, you have to again dial a number and then call him, and then he opens it, lifts the telephone, connects, and then you can transmit the information. But then now here you see there is no formal communication, but then still the information has been percolated in some way or other, because Alice and Bob are bonded together as an entangled pair once they got married. So this is a very interesting story I generally give in the class to make people understand about entanglement, although the entire physics is very troublesome or very complex. So anyway, another thing is quantum measurement, because until unless you measure it, you do not know what is there inside a qubit, what is the state of the qubit, or what is going to return. Because ultimately, human beings are, because all of us human beings are generally more familiar with the classical values. It is not that you go and just go to a restaurant and use your quantum system or quantum computer and give a qubit to the cashier in exchange of your food. It is not so, because that will create some disaster. But so you have to give some money that will be in classical form. So that means, everything, whatever input you give in the system, that will be classical, then it will be converted into quantum system. In all quantum system, everything, all the operations will be quantum mechanical, and then the final output also has to be reverted back to the classical domain. So this reversion back to the classical domain is done by what is referred to as quantum measurement. So what actually is happening, you see, the interesting thing is that people often tell that quantum computing is going to be the technology of the future. But then the interesting thing is that because everything is random over here, I'm not going into the details of what is written over here, just to make you understand what actually happens in terms of, you see, just think of this. If now you are preparing a quantum system in your laboratory, fine. Quantum system means you are taking some qubits, managing some qubits, putting them here and there, manipulating them, putting them into calculation. Some form of quantum system is there where you are handling some qubits, maybe in the ionic level or atomic level, whatever it is. Fine. Now, once you prepare the quantum systems, the position and energy of the different states of the qubits are measured. That means are already known to you. You are know this particular qubit is in state this and this and this, all these things. Now, after measurement, once you measure the system, once you go for measuring the system, the state of the system is said to collapse into an eigenstate of the operator corresponding to the measurement. So that means whether it is going to the 1 state or 0 state, depending on the value of the probability amplitude, whichever is larger. Quite simple. Now you see, the point to be noted is that is why that means practical quantum computers, even desktop computers, are very difficult to realize. Why? Because your system, the quantum system which you have developed, should be isolated from the environment, from any form of disturbances or perturbance. That means you have to ensure that your system is totally isolated from the environment. No form of interference, no noise should be there. A very ideal situation. Then only if you repeat the measurement again using rather you just build up the system and repeat the measurement again, say for example, then it will give you the same result. That means whatever result you have got in the first instance, if you do not allow any external disturbance to disturb your system in any form, because all these things are in atomic level. If any disturbance or any noise comes in, any change in voltage or any change in temperature or pressure, something like that, that will change the state of the qubits. So once the state of the qubits changes, and all these things are random in nature, so the output also will change. So if you do not allow any, or if you just ensure that your system is stable and isolated from surroundings, then only you can ensure that even after repeated measurement, you will always get the same result. But if the preparation is repeated, that means if the preparation gets disturbed or repeated, subsequent measurements are supposed to give different results. That means you will not get a precise result, not accurate. I'm not telling accurate, precise result, because precision means you are getting same type of result every time. You will not get precise results. That means the results will be different in every measurement. So you see, just think of the situation. If you are using a quantum computer which is not isolated from surroundings, and if you want to try to add 2 and 3, so in the classical computer, 2 and 3 will give you 5, but in quantum computer, it may give you 0, it may give you -3, it may give you infinity, it may give you 5, it may give you 6. Each and every time you measure, you get different results. So what is the use of using such a computer? Now, yes, the problem is that means the stability of the environment, ensuring stability and preventing noise to enter the system, that is very, very essential, and that is why that is posing problems to the scientists, because people are working it out day in and day out to how to avoid noises, because noisy situations are very, very difficult to handle, and those things are very very great challenges for developing a quantum computer, realizable quantum computer. So a classical desktop computer which was sitting on your room and you are just working on that, even some disturbances here and there, even if the table on which the computer is resting is vibrating, even then you are getting the better result, because this technology is different. But here you should ensure the temperature, pressure, and all these things to be stable and isolated from the surroundings in order to get accurate results every time. But that is not possible. So what you do, what is the way out? Way out is that you take several measurements and then you go for an average of this expectation value. You take the average of all the values and then you come out with the outcome. So the average result is the outcome. So this is the situation till date. even maybe in the near future, we're optimistic that scientists will be able to solve this problem, and then we'll be able to come up with a with a precise quantum computer. So this is all about measurement. Now these things basic things. We have not a concept of qubits. Now rotation gates. The rotation gate is quite important here because qubits already have discussed the rotation gate. So yesterday I just showed you something like this in the form of a Bloch sphere. So the Bloch sphere, the qubit is here like this, and you can just rotate it or manipulate it. So the rotation gate can rotate it further, either in this direction or along this axis or in this axis. This is the Z axis. So that means the rotation gate can manipulate the qubit. So rotation gate is of this type, is a matrix of this particular form. So when it operates on a single qubit, what actually happens in UC, this is the qubit I told you, because the qubit can be represented as alpha cos phi plus I beta sin phi in terms of the Cartesian coordinates. Spherical coordinates. So you can just have this form. So you can only use the theta part, is the phase part only, cos phi 0 and sin phi 0 as a vector to represent the qubit. Now if you operate this with that means you multiply this together. One matrix is multiplied by vector, you will get a vector. So what actually happens over here, you see, this is the angle theta. This is the angle theta you are going to rotate. This is phi 0. This is phi 0 initial angle or initial phase of the qubit or the wave function. Now we are rotating it by angle theta. So the qubit comes over here. This is theta. So rotation angle theta. So ultimately what actually happens, you see the angle, the phases get added up. That means you are adding the phase with the angle. So you are getting something new qubit, sorry, with a different phase, theta plus phi 0, theta plus phi 0. Why? That means you see, interesting thing is that you, from the early childhood, you know that multiplication is the shortest process of addition, isn't it? If you want to add 5 2's, it is better not to add 5 2, but to multiply by 5. The same result you will get. So multiplication is shortest process of addition. So you see, ultimately you are adding it up. Over here. That is why the angle is added up, theta plus phi 0. But then you are using some multiplication operation. So rotation actually is a multiplication operation. In this, if you just go for the matrix vector form, and then you are coming up with a addition of two phases. So the resultant angle gets changed. So if you just try with the minus theta angle, so it is right minus theta angle. So it will be ultimately cos theta or rather cos phi 0 minus theta. So it will be changed. So actually you are just rotating or manipulating the qubit with some particular angle. Then comes the different gates like NOT gate. So why this is so? Because I'll be discussing, because this gate will be quite useful in the following in this particular topic. So this rotation gate is quite useful in as far as neural network is concerned. How it is being used, I'll be showing you later. So there are several other gates. How the NOT gate is there like this. The quantum NOT gate is there, and how it operates on a qubit. It just switches the probabilities of the basis states. 0, the alpha ket 1, ket 0 plus beta ket 1. Ultimately, after using the NOT gate, you will get the alpha ket 1 and beta ket 0. Now, what is quantum in space of computing? The quantum, as far as quantum computing is concerned, you see these are the advantages you get. First of all, massively increased computational efficiency, because already we discussed earlier that you are dealing with qubits. That means some sort of parallelism is there. You can decide on which particular amplitude you can use and manipulate, and potential for bridging brain and mind. Also, it is increasing relevance because nanotechnology is developing. So quantum computer technology also developed along with the advance of nanotechnology. And also these features, wave function, superposition, measurement, entanglement, other transform, other operators like the Hilbert operators. So these are the features or the advantages offered by quantum computing. And what? But the problem is that quantum computing is a linear theory. That means superposition. If you think of the superposition equation, you will see it is like this: alpha ket 0 plus beta ket 1. So it's one linear equation, isn't it? Linear theory. But ANN, artificial neural network, is a non-linear approach, because everything is non-linear over there. Processing elements are there, transformation by a non-linear mapping, because the function we generally use in a neural network or a transfer function is a sigmoidal activation function. Generally speaking, widely used sigmoidal activation function. So it is non-linear in nature. So the mapping will be non-linear. And not only that, it is an asymptotic form of curve which will not never reach 0 and never reach 1. So there will always be some residual error over there. Will not always attain 1 or 0 perfectly. Anyway, so it is non-linear. Interconnection structure is also non-linear. That is why you have come up with different layers of hidden neurons and all these things, network dynamics, and learning rule is there, and massively parallel distributed of processing of information. So if you think of combining quantum computing with neural network to come up with some what is referred to as quantum neural network, you are going to combine a linear theory with non-linear theory. It's very difficult. So that is very major problem. However, people have come up with different models of neural network. The Kanama of 2000 was one of them, very useful neural network. Quantum neural network they came up. Now, given this information, whatever background we have studied regarding the qubits, the superposition, the rotation gate you have now come through, then obviously ANN ANN as such So given that those background, now our objective will be develop a quantum neuron. First of all, this neuron, the processing unit or elementary unit of a neural network, that is the neuron, will be just trying to develop a quantum neuron first and then trying to interconnect them together to form the quantum neural network. So you see, this may be a quantum neuron model. Now you see, now this is not a universal neural model. It may be different from, you can also design differently, but maybe this is one of the possible designs. So in neural network, what you know that is neural network is there. Actually, you can just think of a circle or a black box like that, where input is coming, output is coming up, and these are interconnected. Other nodes are also there, not going into detail. So what actually it comprises of two compartments. One is that you go for a summation operation of what? Wi, sorry, not here. Wi into II or whatever input you are giving. So all the W's are there and all the I's are coming, inputs are coming, I1, I2, etc. They are multiplied by the corresponding weights and they are summing it up, product. And then what you are doing, you are taking a transfer function. So this input is transfer function is applied on this input, on this summed up product, and then you get the output. This is the philosophy. That is, the summation part is there and a transfer function is there. Similar, you see, you can think of a quantum neural network as a similar structure, having two compartments like this, where the inputs are in the form of qubits. In the previous case, it was classical values, that is normalized values between 0 and 1, but here you are inputting qubits, ktex1, ktex2, ktexn, and this is obviously a bias. Is similar to that of a perceptron or any neural network. A -1 input, constant input is given as a bias or threshold. Now, in the case of a neural network, conventionally you have the weights over here, W. Here, what you do, you can put a rotation gate with angle θ1. Why? Because ultimately, what you are doing over here, you are doing what? Wij into, say, not I, say, let's suppose that let's suppose I input I. So Wi, you are multiplying this together, isn't it? Weight into multiplied by the input. So you used to have something which is manipulating the qubit or in a form of multiplication, which can be done by rotation gate. I've already shown you. So you have to use the rotation gate over here, which to represent the weights in the quantum domain. A quantum rotation gate, that means it replaces the classical weight, interconnection weight. Similar R θ2 with another angle θ2, R θn another angle θn, and R lambda for the bias. So you see, all these things are actually heuristic in nature. θ1, you do not know the actual value. θ2, you do not know that, because all these are random. That is why in neural network also, the weights are initially random in nature. So here also the θ1, θ2, θ3, etc., all these things are random. So the weights are random. Fine. So this part we have done. Now you are here. What you are doing, summation of R θi and ktex I. That means this operation you are doing. This particular operation, what you are doing over here, this operation you are doing, similar operation, but using quantum variables, and you are getting U. And then what you are doing, you are using a G delta function. G delta function is the sigmoidal activation function in the quantum domain, and minus argument U, taking the real part of U only real part, because you take the imaginary part as well, but then the results will be different. I told you, because it's a totally random system. Whether you take the real part or the imaginary part of the qubit, you will end up with different results. A typical case here, you have used the real part, and then you have fed it into the G delta function, that is the sigmoidal activation function. And then finally you get something which is S output in the form of Fy. Why Fy? I'll be discussing that soon. So I hope this is quite clear to you. Similar, a replica of this part, a quantum replica of this one. Now, actually, what is you seeing? What is actually how it is operating? Xi as the xi kth xi the input qubits, r theta as the rotation gates, and lambda is the input bias. Now we define this fx is equal to e to the power ix, just for the sake of simplicity of notation, because an imaginary number can be used like they can be represented by this. So it is represented as fx is equal to e to the power ix, where I is equal to minus root over minus 1. So thus u comes out to be summation I is equal to 1 to n number of nodes, then r theta I into kth xi, the inputs coming in, minus f lambda bias, similar to that, f lambda, because f lambda is getting multiplied by minus 1, because here the input is minus 1. So ultimately what is actually happening? You are doing what? You are actually doing plus of, also summing it up, plus of, within bracket, minus 1 into f lambda. That means ultimately it is equal to minus f lambda. Fine. Then y actually is the final output. It is coming as pi by 2 g delta lambda. Why g delta lambda is given by this. Pi by 2 factor is used because for the phase factor, minus argument u is this part. You take in the real part over here. So g delta is equal to 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus delta, is sigmoidal activation function. If you just can remember the classical one, it is also classical, but in a different format. Y is equal to fx is equal to 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus, let's just go note, minus x minus theta by theta naught. So theta naught is actually 1 by theta naught, actually, or theta naught determines the slope of the function. Theta might not determine the slope, whether the function will be like this or it will be like this. The slope of the function will be determined by theta naught. And theta is the bias. The x minus theta is actually what? This part. This is the x. And x minus theta is the bias, this part. So you are putting that to the exponent. So this is how you do. Delta contains everything, information, delta. So delta is also actually which is also random in nature because of the randomness of this r theta and lambda. Because lambda you also do not know, it is heuristic, you have chosen it randomly. Then ultimately what you do, you get the s is equal to, you also express y, because it is the imaginary complex number, you express y in this form as the e to the power iy is the neuron output. So similar type of operation, but in different form. I obviously have not gone into the detailed mathematics. So you see, if you just have this quantum neuron model in place, you can just interconnect them together to form a 3-layer architecture like this, a quantum backpropagation neural network. So it is the input layer. Inputs are Kate alpha 1, Kate alpha 2, maybe other inputs also there up to Kate alpha n, connected to different rotation gates, or like this, psi C1. C1 means from the first input to the third hidden node. So in this notation, you can see 0, 3, 1. So all the interconnected, fully connected network architecture similar to multi-layer perceptron or MLP, classical MLP. Again, here another node. Again, these are connected again. Now here, now this is a 3-layer. This is the hidden layer, and this is only one single hidden layer, and this output layer. And ultimately, output is coming over here, where you are taking the measurement over here to get that, not measurement, but ultimately you are getting a qubit over here. Finally, you get this phi 1 qubit, which can be measured to get the classical value. Okay. So now there are 2 inputs. Maybe depending on your problem, you can 2 outputs. Maybe depending on your problem, you can decide the number of outputs. Now, so you see it is analogous to the classical multi-layer perceptron. How? So one input layer of quantum neurons represented by how the quantum neurons are represented, superposition state of qubits already shown, which accept the inputs from the form of qubits. Hidden layers, several hidden layers may be there. Only the figure 1 hidden layer has been shown with a varying number of quantum neurons. So this you see number of nodes in the hidden layer may be different. Maybe 5, 6. You do not, because there is also an open problem. And then one output layer of quantum neurons. So connection weights are represented by single qubit rotation gates. Fine. Now actually how it is operating. So first of all, you take the input real value, classical values xi. They are scaled in the range of 0 to 1 because neural networks accept only values within the range of 0 to 1. Then they are transformed into qubit xi. That means how it is a transform. A scalar can be transformed to the qubit, just converting that into a phasor function by using this a pi by 2 into xi. So when you get this type of, this is the qubit which is coming up, gate xi. And the output layer, obviously, if you are taking the imaginary part of y, then you are getting sine square, because actually we have already discussed that it is any qubit can be represented as alpha cos theta plus I sine theta, I beta sine theta. So that is why you can, if you take the imaginary part to calculate, or may take your make your all calculations, you will come up with the sine y whole square. That is the final output. So now, what you do actually, why you have taken the imaginary part, fine. Because here you are interested, here in this particular problem, you are interested to retrieve the object from the noise. That means you have to remove the noise. So you have to just allocate the object to be 1 and the noise to be 0, or noise to be eliminated. So in fact, you have to just go for a demarcation between the object and background, with the object being 1 and the background being 0. That is why you've taken the imaginary part and connected the real part to the, connected G1 to the imaginary part. I don't know why the mouse is going. 1 to the imaginary part and 0 to the real part. So we are not interested in 0. We are mainly concerned with imaginary, because it is a very huge structure, complex number. So having two parts, one real part and imaginary part, better you can carry out calculation on one part. That is the beauty of any qubit or quantum computing based calculation. Yesterday we also showed alpha and beta. So you can just monitor whether alpha will be conducive enough to move forward with, or beta, depending on their values, relative values. So here you have taken the imaginary part quite deliberately, just to focus on the imaginary part and focus on the one part. Also, you can take the real part as well, but also you can get a mixture of 0 and 1 depending on the values of alpha and beta. But here, strictly, I will use the imaginary part. And then you see, in the case of a neural network, classical neural network, what you do, you generally get the outputs and then you compare. Now, this is a supervised form of architecture, but you compare the outputs with the expected outputs, and then you get some error, and then you go for backpropagation algorithm, backpropagate the errors. Now, why the errors are coming at all? First of all, the weights are random. Even if the inputs are fixed and constant, inputs are not noisy, or not noisy, I'm not speaking, sorry. Inputs are not changing, inputs you know. But then the weights are random, so you do not know the weights. That is why these random weights are creating some random outputs, and then random outputs are not likely to be similar or closer to the expected output. That is why you are getting error. So if the outputs, if the weights were known, then obviously you should have got the correct output. That is why this training procedure is done, to just adjust the weights so that they come closer to some stabilized weight whenever you get the outputs which are very close to the expected output. You will not get the same output as the expected output, because of the fact that the sigmoidal function, if you have using the sigmoidal function, it is asymptotic in nature. It will never give you 0 output exactly, or never give you 1 output exactly. You always has to be some residual error. Anyway, so that means there is a factor W, or the weight, which is creating the problem. That is random. It is contributing to the error. That is why you go for if you can recollect the backpropagation algorithm, you go for a partial derivative of gradient of E with respect to W, isn't it? That means you try to just evaluate the error, or change of error with respect to the change of weights. That is why it's why weights, because weight is actually ultimately contributing to the error. So here in this case, you see that in this case it was very simple, because you have only one parameter, weight, needs to be adjusted. But here you have to adjust 3 kinds of parameters. One is the phase parameter of weight connection, theta, because theta are not known, they are random in nature. The threshold also you do not know, random in nature. And the reversal parameter delta of the sigmoidal function, e to the power minus delta, is also not known. So these 3 parameters need to be adjusted, compared to only one single parameter in the case of a classical neural network. So network error is represented by this standard formulation. So then what you do, you just go for the error gradient with respect to what? Now with respect to the weight. So you see weight is here theta, determined by theta because it is in the rotation gate. So now JK, sorry, JK is actually, if you just go back to the figure, we have designated this as the ith layer, input layer, this is the jth layer, hidden layer, and this is the kth layer, output layer. So JK means from the hidden to the output. So this is the weight from the hidden to the output. Rotation gate, that means the angle for the rotation gate from the hidden to output, and we are taking the gradient descent to find out the corresponding error. So then just what you do actually, that if you just can calculate this part, that this is the error portion we are getting, if you have to adjust that. So what you do, you just go for get the new weight, not the weight, actually new angle of rotation by taking the older weight and minus of eta, eta is the learning parameter, into this delta E, delta theta old, which is given in the previous expression. So I have not given all entire mathematics. If you want the entire mathematics, you can refer to my publication. But here you see just similar type of expression as in the case of classical neural networks. So for the hidden to output layer interconnection, how to adjust the weights or it is learning coefficient. Similarly, for the input to hidden, also you get similar type of expression. Okay. So just as if you follow on similar lines, you can get some mathematical manipulations. I have not included for obvious reasons. So you can also adjust the lambda k, that is the threshold, lambda k old minus eta into a gradient of error with respect to the lambda, because lambda is also contributing for the error because it's also random in nature. Similarly, delta also contributing. You can also have to get the gradient with respect to delta. It is for the output layer and it is for the hidden layer. Okay. So because input layer does not come into picture because the lambda is impressed on the different layers only. So it is not from one layer to another. So it is for the output layer. It is the function, sigmoidal activation function you are using for the output layer. Output layer, not all the nodes, because you are using the same sigmoidal activation function for all the nodes. So delta k, and this is for the threshold for the hidden layer, and this is the sigmoidal activation function for the hidden layer. So you get the updated equations like this, similar type of expressions, but then the calculations are different, obviously. Now, given this background, that means and then you go for backpropagation. Now, backpropagation, quantum backpropagation, already a new topic altogether. So it is beyond the scope because it is also some sort of assumptions based on which you can design the quantum version of the standard backpropagation algorithm. So we've already done that, but then it is not within the purview of this lecture, so I'm skipping that. But then you can adjust the errors using the quantum backpropagation algorithm by using these particular formulations. Let us see how it actually performs. Doing all these things for nothing. Let us see what is actually happening. Given some results over here. So what we have done in the experiments, we have just taken the QBPN architecture. I don't know what is the mouse is hovering. You've taken a QBPN architecture already. You have just proposed that and compared that with the classical MLP. And on what problem? On the restoration of images from blurred and noisy background. So what architecture have taken? 4981, 49 input nodes, 8 hidden nodes, and 1 output node. Why one output node? Because we are interested in only 2 classes, noisy and non-noisy. Whether there is noise or not, so the 2 classes are, so one single output node is sufficient to represent 2 classes. So that is now, why this architecture at all? Why this architecture? Because I already told you, because all this is also known to all of you, that the number of neurons in each and every layer, there is no rule of thumb as such. You have to just experiment and come out with the best possible combination. So this has come out with the best possible combination for this particular problem. I'm telling you, all these machine learning algorithms are not actually universal, and only then research will stop. So these are for a particular problem. So 49 input nodes, 8 hidden nodes, and 1 output node is considered, and you're using a 7x7 pixel neighborhood window. So you have scanned the entire pixel, not on pixel to pixel basis, but on window to window, taking 7x7 window. That means 7x7 window is taken, and taking all the information is fed to the neural network, then another 7 to 7. So in this way, you have gone. And then what we have just found the base balance of convergence ratio and a signal to noise ratio. So we have to just try to just balance between the signal to noise ratio and the convergence ratio. So based on that, we have just adjusted the number of iterations. So you see, so data set is that we have taken two real level images, Lena and Tulip. So training images were there each of size 5 cross 512 cross 512 dimension and 8-bit level gray level. So that will yield you how many training say patterns? 262, 144. So we have taken 262, 144 with different combinations of images and noises to this much of training pattern, which is very huge, 262,144. And then both the networks are trained on this type of this particular images and samples or inputs, and then they're applied for the image, solving the problem, image sharpening and noise filtering. Two types of noises were taken, Gaussian and uniform. So how you see the results are coming up is the training images, some snapshot of training images out of these 2 lakh images. So you see A is the training original image. A is the original image. This is having a lens bar of 15 pixels. If you just give a blur of 15 pixels, you will get this type of image. Gaussian noise with standard deviation 16, this one. And uniform noise with a degree of 25%, this one. So this is the input, some snapshot of the input we have taken. Similar for the Tulip image. Also you see original, blur, Gaussian and uniform. So then you see output Lena images using after 5,000 epochs using the quantum backpropagation neural network output. So you see that A is for the lens blur. You are getting the QBPN output, and this is the MLP output. This is for Gaussian noise QBPN. This is the Gaussian noise. This is the MLP for Gaussian noise. This is the QBPN for uniform, MLP for uniform. Now it is very difficult because if you just go for subjective assessment, there will be several arguments as to which image is better. They obviously then for the establishment of the performance, you have to judging the performance, you have to go for some objective assessment. Let us see the next set of outputs for the Tulip image. Obviously, this one is for the lens blur removed by QBPNN. This is by MLP. This is by QBPNN and Gaussian noise. By MLP, this is uniform noise. By QBPNN and this is by MLP. Again, it is very difficult to judge which one is better. So you go for some objective calculation of quality measurement. So how do quality measure? First of all, you go for the network convergence. See which network is giving you. So results are more or less comparable. But then even if you do not get any betterment in image quality, let us see how the networks are performing in terms of convergence time. So how these are decided? Based on the mean square error and convergence ratio. So you see, just to adjust the efficiency of the network, so you see that we have set the MSE, minimum, the limit of MSE, the mean square error, has to be less than 0.0015 in less than 5,000 epochs. This is the yardstick we have decided. That you have to have a network which will reach an MSE less than this in less than 5,000 epochs. That becomes acceptable. Let's take it as standard. Now you see that the MLP using these parameters, MLP has a convergence ratio of 0.92, okay, with a learning rate of this one, eta is equal to this, and QBPN has a 0.98 learning rate of 0.0. Now, mind you, now this 0.025 is not fixed. We have tested with different learning rates, and this has given the best performance. And obviously, also this has given the best performance. But the catch is over here. QBPN converges faster, 742 epochs, while MLP takes 3048, around more than 3 times. So you see, if you see the figure, this is the QBPN, falls steeply down, converges at this, and then after this is the MSE limit, and after that it goes down and down and down. So the errors are moving. But we have observed until 5,000 iterations. But even if the limit was 5,000 iterations, it has reached its requirement at 742 epochs, compared to this one, which is 3048 in the case of the MLP classical one. So obviously it is faster. It has been established that it is faster. One objective has been achieved. We have come up with an efficient, more time efficient neural network. Fine. And now what about the quality of the images? Even if you get a faster network, if the quality is degraded, no one will accept. So let us see what actually happens for the quality. So quality are determined by signal to noise ratio. So table shows this after 5,000 epochs. So you see for each and every image MLP output SNR, signal to noise ratio and signal to noise ratio. So you see the better performance in terms of the QBAP. Obviously, there are some aberrations. In some cases, it is found only some selected outputs are shown over it. In some cases, it is found MLP is outperforming. But in most of the cases, the QBPN is outperforming MLP in terms of both the quality of the images as well as the convergence time. So now, whatever we have achieved or discussed so far, we have just tried to find out or proposed a generalized QBPN model for expression of images from different backgrounds, noisy or blurred. And the results show that the efficiency of QBPN with the classical counterpart in both in terms of convergence speed or convergence ratio and convergence speed. Now, some of the selected reference, if you feel like, you can also browse it. And if anyone is interested to continue further or read further on this particular paper, you can just contact me, or you can have this also in several works are there. You can just see the internet as well.
Okay, so sir, I thank you very much for being with us despite of your busy schedule, as you are already principal of Rajnagar Mahavidyalaya. So you have taken out time to schedule and enhance the knowledge in quantum computing to the participants. I hope the two important topics in quantum meta heuristics and image enhancement using quantum computing will help most of us to think in the research direction. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your.